Greetings, YouTube. I apologize up front for covering this same topic so recently. In the past, it was post-apocalyptic scenarios, but someone asked me for an opinion about the different possibilities that are put forth in the book D20 Modern Apocalypse. A book which didn't thrill me. I thought it was a little lackluster, but it had awesome art. So they present some different suggestions on how you can end the world, and the person who made the request to me asked me to cover what they said. Okay, so the first one up we have is Alien Invasion. Now that was what was used in 3rd edition D&D, rather 3rd edition Gamma World, and it's what I used. Aliens caused the end of the world as we know it. General warfare, nuclear strikes, planetary strikes, things like that. Frankly, at this point in time, I consider it a little trite. I would love to see an original take on Alien Invasion. That would be cool. If anybody has any scenarios where aliens invade and it's an original concept and it has something fresh and new, that would be awesome. Next is biological disasters, pandemics, essentially. Now, one of the problems is that diseases don't function in the real world the way they do in fiction. Very rarely you're going to find a disease that is even possible to take as much as 75% of the population out, let alone what they usually do in fiction, which is like 90 to 95 or even higher % of people taken out. Diseases just don't work that way. Even if you try to design them as weapons, for example, anthrax and smallpox, when released in the air in aerosols, are often vastly reduced in strength by sunlight. So if these powders are released during the daytime, the sunlight itself can destroy the bacteria they're in, the virus they're in, and make them less efficient. Which means you release them at night, but still it means they don't travel as far. So the whole pandemic thing is difficult for me to buy. And then, of course, Steve mentions the possibility of using a zombie virus, and I just think that is so trite at this point. Zombies have been done to death, folks. I think that we should move on. Environmental cataclysm. This is basically where things go bad because of nature. Massive earthquakes, volcanoes. The volcano's a good one. The caldera out in the western America, if that blows, ash will be falling in New England, folks. It's going to be nasty. So there are ones that are very useful in that regard, but he does cite a couple of things, like, for example, the day after tomorrow, where the temperatures radically dropped. Absolute fantasy, had no bearing on reality whatsoever. You might as well just say magic. And then he talks about the center of the earth stops spinning, as in from the movie The Core. I need to watch that movie. I own a copy. I need to watch that movie. I'm not a big fan of environmental cataclysms as the cause of the apocalypse. I just don't think they're going to cause the kind of destruction on the level that you need to achieve the goals. You're going to have a different world, but it'll be a world like us, with just a lot of problems going on. But I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. Asteroid strike. This is a good one. Took out the dinosaurs. It can take out us. And it's nice because in many ways it's a clean apocalypse, in the fact that it freezes everything in the modern era, that when the strike happens, it comes out of nowhere for the most part. It's going to be a long time before we have the ability to detect asteroids at sufficient distances to do anything about them. And we're not even looking, really, at this point. And there is not going to be any radiation, probably, because there's no general war, no biochemical issues. So if you like that kind of a scenario, you just want to throw the modern world into chaos, that works. Next we have Judgment Day, which is pure religious based. Essentially biblical things come to this world and everything goes to heck. Now I have a problem from a first point of view, because it kind of means that the Judeo-Christian view of the world is the correct view of the world. I think that's not true, and it's arrogant. That's one of the reasons I love the Day After Ragnarok scenario so much. That is an awesome book, folks. If you have not read it, go get the Day After Ragnarok. Because it deals with the Norse end of the world coming here. Nice fresh take. So if you could maybe use the Judgment Day concept, like an apocalypse from another culture, I might think that was nice. Like, for example, we have the upcoming Mayan calendar kerfuffle. That might be a good way to do it. I mean, Shadowrun based the entire game on it, so I think that's a possibility. There's something at least that could be brought to the table that's fresh, which is nice. Next we have Nuclear Armageddon, everyone's favorite. I don't think there's ever going to be a general exchange of nuclear missiles, ever. Not to mention the only people who really have them have a vested interest in not blowing each other up. However, in almost every post-apocalyptic scenario I use, I always have some small-scale exchange, because as things fall apart, people use it as an excuse to, nuke somebody they've always wanted to nuke. Other possibilities are, for example, you can use nuclear weapons to cauterize an area that is deemed dangerous. So, for example, there's a massive pandemic and they want to stop it from spreading further. They may nuke a site. No Leaves of Grass, a good book, a pretty decent film, wherein a disease begins to wipe out all of the grasses. And most of our food is grass-based. So to stop the countrysides from being destroyed in Britain, the British government actually nukes some major metropolitan areas to kill the people, preventing them from getting out, into the world and destroying the countrysides, giving the countrysides a chance at surviving. A surgical strike to save some of the population, nasty, hard call to make kind of thing, but a nuclear weapon can be used that way. You could use it for cauterizing nanotechnology outbreaks, even if you want to use zombies. It was used in Return of the Living Dead, not well, but it was used in Return of the Living Dead. So everybody's favorite. It gets you radiation, it gives you mutations, even though real-world mutations aren't anything like role-playing ones. Next, Rise of the Machines. I've spoken about Rise of the Machine concept in the past. I think it's silly. I think the first thing that a fully self-aware machine intelligence would do was build itself a ship and fire itself into space and get away from us, because that's all it needs to do. There is limitless power in space. There are limitless resources in space. It can go out there. It can have its own existence. It never has to get involved with us at all. So I find Rise of the Machine scenarios really silly. It's just like the machines want to kill us because the machines want to kill us. Machines don't have emotions, folks. So they would just leave. Rogue Planet, again, very similar to the Asteroid concept. Rogue planets getting close to us will cause massive problems, but they aren't magic like Thundar the Barbarian presents you with the concept. So I don't. Rogue Planet has never really been my thing at all in any way, shape, or form. And we have supernatural invasions. Now, this is where you get flat out into the fantasy world, which is great. If you want to use fantasy as your apocalyptic end, that's cool. I've never seen it really done well unless it was tied to the Judgment Day scenario. Well, that's not wholly true. Warp World had elves and dwarves and things coming into our world. So Warp World, I guess, could say would be an example of a post-apocalyptic game that did in fact use some fantasy elements. That was kind of cool, I guess. It was a fresh look at least, and I recommend taking a look at the game if you haven't yet. The illustrations are a really nice example of how you could see a world develop after an apocalypse, and it shows you like the same scene over the span of like a couple of 100 years. So it was quite interesting. But I think it's opened up to all kinds of possibilities, like when the fairy were to come back, for example, or maybe a fantasy or a supernatural invasion of something that hasn't been done yet. That's going to be hard. They're really mining that genre like a son of a gun at this point, so it's hard to find a fresh take on that, but I think it's a possibility. Now, as the requester mentioned, some of my favorite scenarios are nanotechnology and electromagnetic pulses. Those are the ones I have used repeatedly in the past, and I happen to really like them, but I also mix them with nuclear and biological warfare. As people take the opportunity, the world's ending, they start to attack each other. Because one of the things that's going to survive a massive EMP are military sites. They're designed to withstand EMPs. And nanotechnology could be designed to act purely on a biological level. For example, giving you the palladiums after the bomb, where you have all kinds of genetic material being spliced into humans and all kinds of human material being spliced into animals, blending and blurring the line between what is and is not human. animals being raised up, humans being brought down, until you have a world with all kinds of weird and strange races. And the society collapses because it just can't handle the stress. It's also a nice way of getting races in a game, because you could have, say, the nanotechnology, or just the surgical viruses that have gone wild, create new races that become stable. So you could have a scenario or any of your choices and use this as a side element to them to create stable races for your game, with semi-plausible concept of why they exist. So I hope that this is helpful to the requester, whose name at the moment I forget. I apologize. I think I just deleted the email. So I'm looking for anyone's opinion on any of these scenarios I brought forward to you. I will list the content that he gave me in the notes below, so that you can take a look at it. And I'm interested in hearing what people have to say about this, that they've used in the past, or ideas that they would like to use in the future.